Hello, everybody. This is Drew from Movie Mortis here, and I'm here continuing my series of continuing my review series of the Scream franchise. Today, I'm continuing it with Scream 2. I know this video is a couple weeks late. I know, I covered the original Scream several weeks ago, as well as we talked about Scream on the Movie Mortis podcast as well about a week ago, little over a week ago now, as the time I'm recording this. So I know I'm a bit late on this, but still better late than never. But yeah, we're covering Scream 2 today, released in 1997. Once again, much like the first film, directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. I'm also back wearing the Ice Nine Kills t-shirt. I wore this for the Scream 1 review as well. Figured might as well bring it back. I did forget to mention that funny, cool story, cool side note about this t-shirt is that at this particular show, I got this T-shirt. I got this at a Nice Night Kills show in Sacramento a couple years back. I actually got to meet them at that show because I had VIP. It was very cool. Ice Night Kills are a great band. They have a song about Scream called "Your Numbers Up." Technically, they have two now. Go with "Twisting the Knife" when Scream 7. But regardless, we're here to talk about Ice Night Kills are a great band. But we're here to talk about Scream 2. Now, Scream 2 is a sequel that I think to kind of sum up my overall thoughts of it here at the top. It's a really solid sequel, but at the same time, in many ways, it does not um live up to the original. Um, so I got a couple things here. Where should I start? So the first one I want to start is, you know, one of the things that differentiates Scream from other horror series, especially other like slasher movie series, is that much of the same cast reprises their roles throughout the movies. So, returning from the first Scream, you have Nev Campbell as Sidney Prescott, you have Jamie Kennedy as Randy Meeks, Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers, and David Arquette as Dewey Riley. Um, but they're all great here. Nev Campbell is the standout, I think. Obviously, she's the lead. But also, I said this on the when me and Nick talked about Scream on the Movie Mortis podcast. Something I said in regards to Nev Campbell is I really do think that her performances as Sydney get better as the series goes on because she gets more comfortable in the role over time and all that stuff usually how actors do. And don't get me wrong, keep in mind Sydney's performance, Nev Campbell's performance in the first Scream as Sydney, I think is the best performance in that movie, and so she only gets continues to get better from here. You can tell by the way she just by her body language, her facial expressions, and even just the way she sort of just you know you can feel her lack of trust in people as these murders continue to happen. You can feel all her sense of trust is just completely gone after the events of the first movie, and especially after the murders and everything start again at Windsor College in Ohio, which is where she and Randy are currently going to school away from Woodsboro. Speaking of Randy, Jamie Kennedy is really good here too. He you can in many ways, he's still the same character as in the first Scream. He's a film buff. He's going to film class. You know, he's still very much the movie geek that delivers the rules of the rules of sequels that kind of connects to the meta commentary of this movie. Um, Gail Weathers, Courtney Cox's Gail Weathers, and David Arquette as Dewey are great in here too. They naturally have great chemistry because they were a former couple in real life. Uh, David Arquette and Courtney Cox were. But in many ways, this one really expands on Scream 2 really expands on their dynamic because in the first movie, again, this is something we talked about on the podcast, something when we covered the first Scream. In the first one, Dewey and Gale are sort of just off to the side, especially in the third act. They're sort of just off to the side, and what's going on in the house is large in Stu's house is largely disconnected from what's going on with Dewey and Gale. But with here, it's more connected because they're both trying to, you know, in many ways begrudgingly, work together to try to find who the killer is. find out who the killer is. So their involvement is actually, their relationship itself is much more fleshed out because it actually progresses a little more, but also it's actually connected to what's going on in the plot. They're not just off to the side. Um, but continue with the cast. We also have some newcomers as well. We have Jerry O'Connell as Derek, Sydney's boyfriend, typical supportive boyfriend character. You have what's her name? Uh, Elise O'Neill, I believe, as Hallie, who's Sydney's roommate. Um, she's very much the Tatum of this movie. She's Sydney's, her probably the only person that she trusts in this movie outside of Dewey. Um, so you have her; she's her roommate and everything. You also have Liev Schreiber as Cotton Weary, who you saw glimpses of in the first movie, but he now plays more of a bigger role. He's like he is a very he's trying to prove that he's in it. He's still kind of trying to prove that he's innocent. In the first movie, he's the person that was originally framed for Maureen Prescott's murder, Sydney's mother. But here it's like, yeah, he's trying to prove his innocence, but he's also trying to get his 15 minutes of fame. He's also very fame hungry and all that. Um, yeah, Liev Schreiber. You have Portia de Rossi and uh, who's the other one? Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart as sorority sisters. Laurie Metcalf as Debbie Salt, a reporter who's hounding Gail, who's hounding Gail all the time in many scenes in this movie. Dwayne Martin as Joel, who is Gail's new cameraman. Uh, and so I got the cast listing here. Hold up. So the other thing I want to talk about, the next thing I want to talk about is the opening scene. In many ways, it is completely, in the first stream, it was at a house in the middle of nowhere. Where in the stream two, it's the opposite to where it is in a crowded movie theater, a crowded public place. They're showing the premiere of the movie Stab, which is the in-universe stand-in for the Scream series, and it's based off the book that Gail wrote about the events of the first Scream. Um, it's clearly very exploitative. It's very much something that Gail Weathers would write. It's very exploitative, very much in poor taste. They're even handing out Ghostface costumes at this premiere, which given the fact that in universe this movie is based on real murders that actually happened. It's pretty distasteful, but I think that's kind of the point. I think it's kind of a commentary, kind of one of sort of a bit of commentary that's continuous throughout the entire Scream series is how whatever form of media it is, they tend to take tragedy and exploit it as for both for financial gain as well as turn it into a spectacle, an entertainment spectacle. So that's very much strong here in the opening scene. So the two victims this time are Maureen, played by Jada Pinkett Smith, as well as Phil, played by Omar Epps. Um, I mean, they're the opening victims. There's not too much to say there. Jada Pinkett's character, Maureen, she's the critic of horror movies. She's clearly not interested in horror and all that stuff. As they're going in, she's talking shit about the movie, and she hasn't even seen it. She hasn't even seen it. And I think it's kind of funny that later in the scene when she actually sits down and actually starts to get into it and starts to watch the movie, she actually starts to get into it, which I think is kind of cool. Um, but yeah, Phil and Maureen get killed. Um, Phil gets taken out in the men's bathroom, and Jada Pinkett gets taken out in the movie theater as the movie is playing, and people are going crazy. People are going crazy. And so I think it's a really effective scene. There's not even, unlike the opening scene of both the first movie and a lot of the Scream sequels that would come after this one, there's no opening scene phone call. It's just Ghostface shows up and kills Maureen and Phil. And something else too is that what makes the tension, what is the source of the tension in the opening scene, is how, in this crowded movie theaters, there's a bunch of people wearing Ghostface masks, Ghostface costumes. They have knives and stuff. But what the tension comes is that there has to be one genuinely out to kill, and you don't know where they're going to pop up, and so that's where the tension comes in that scene. But overall, it's a great opening scene, great way to kick off the movie, and it differentiates itself from the first one because they don't try to outdo the opening scene of the first one, because you really can't outdo the Scream's opening, because it's like one of the best openings in not just horror movies but in any movie. Some other standout sequences are, spoiler alert, by the way, from here on out, is Randy gets killed. That's one of the phone call sequences in the movie where, so Gail, Randy, and Dewey are sitting on a bench and they're talking, and Ghostface calls Gail's phone, and Randy picks up and starts talking to the killer, to Ghostface, who's, by the way, the voice is once again provided by Roger L. Jackson, who knocks out of the park as he usually does. And so Randy's talking to Ghostface on the phone, talking to the killer on the phone, and Gail and Dewey are running around trying to figure out who, you know, trying to basically tackling anybody with a cell phone, which, given the fact that it takes place in the 90s, it's still, in 1997, it still wasn't a super common thing for everybody to have cell phones. So watching it in 2026, where literally everybody has cell phones, it is kind of funny. But obviously, none of the people that Gale and Dewey get to are the killer. Who is the killer is the person hanging out in Gale's van. Randy eventually gets close to Gale's van. Ghostface pops out, takes him into the van, and stabs him to death while a bunch of kids walk by the van blasting some shitty rap song. Isn't effective. It sucks to see Gale. I mean, not Gale. Dewey. No, not fucking Dewey. What am I talking about? Randy. Sorry. Um, it sucks to see Randy go, but I really think it amps up the stakes, because like the most important building block for tension in a horror movie is stakes, and I think killing off a well known, as well established character like this, it kind of achieves something similar to what killing off Drew Barrymore in the opening scene of the first Scream did, where it establishes that to the audience that nobody is safe and anybody can die at any time, which I think you have to have that feeling in a horror movie for it to have any tension, because there needs to be stakes. Another standout sequence is a bit later on in the movie after this, is when Gale is being chased by Ghostface in the film department of the college of Windsor College. That's a great that's a great chase sequence there. A lot of tension. There's a lot of shots of Gale rounding a corner, and Ghostface kind of in the background, kind of just behind her, just to where they can't really see each other, but I mean, you can see that they're there. Well, that Ghostface is there, but Gale is not, and is just out of his field of view, which, I think that really makes the scene very suspenseful. But one issue I have with this movie, and it's an issue that's going to come up as we get through this Scream sequels. So again, another thing I talked about in the podcast about Scream One is that when in Scream One, when they were setting up a red herring or making people seem suspicious, trying to get the audience to be suspicious of a particular character, it would point out something about the character, like how Sheriff Burke, for example, was wearing the exact same boots as Ghostface was in the bathroom scene. There's a scene where Sheriff Burke and Dewey are talking, Burke puts out his cigarette by stomping on it with his boot, and it you can tell that those are the same boots that Ghostface are wearing. So it's like, oh, maybe Ghostface can. I'm not maybe. I'm sorry, guys. It's late tonight as I'm recording this. That maybe Sheriff Burke can be the killer, or the in Scream One when the person that really wants you to suspect throughout the whole movie is Neil Prescott, Sydney's father, to where it's like, well, he's not registered at any in this hotel that he, he's not registered at any of these hotels that he said he was going to be staying at. Nobody can find him. So it's like, oh, and then they find his car. Gail and Dewey find his car by Stu's house as everything's going on. So it's like, oh, okay. It's pointing these things about these characters that happen to line up with what's going on. In Scream 2, however, a bunch of people are just suspicious for no reason. And then when you find out later who the killers are, you watch back, you rewatch the movie, and you're just like, there's literally no way this person should be acting this suspicious at this time. Case in point, Cotton Weary. That's one of my problems I have with his character in this movie, is that there's a scene where he's talking to Sydney, and he is in in the school library, in the campus library, and dude is acting so fucking suspicious. It's like it's he's acting suspicious to the point where he is like, where it's like he's almost like he wants to get caught, because he's not only he's getting really uncomfortably close to Sydney, he's kind of talking like Ghostface. He's even touching her, which is really weird, really creepy. So there's that, and then there's those sorority sisters who earlier have a scene with where they come up with Sydney and everybody, um, and they're like, "Oh, we're keeping an eye on you," very creepily, and it's like I know they meant, because because they want her to join Sydney to join their sorority, but it's like it's just really odd, and they're not even like they only have like a handful of scenes too. So I guess we're talking about spoilers. We should probably talk about the killer reveals. So the killers in this movie turn out to be Debbie Salt, aka Nancy Loomis, Billy's mother, and Mickey Altieri, one of the new characters, played by Timothy Oliphant, who I didn't mention until now, because he's only in like a handful of scenes at the beginning of the movie prior to his reveal, which is kind of. I like the concept of. I like post reveal. Timmy the Oliphant, like Mickey, is so fun to watch post reveal because the dude is clearly completely out of his fucking mind. He has this whole motive of how he wants to blame the movie, get caught, and blame the movies for his crimes, and like that is only a motive that a total psycho, someone who's totally out of their mind, would come up with. But that's what's so fun about it. He's just totally out of his mind. And then with Debbie Salt, aka Nancy Loomis, I like the idea that hey, it's Billy's mother, but again, much like with Mickey, it's like she's only in a handful of scenes before her reveal. Like the only scenes she's in are those handful of scenes where she's bothering Gail for for a story or for um trying to get um tips from Gail. There's a scene where she's introduced where she's like, "Hi, I'm Debbie Solve. I was at your seminar in Chicago." And that's really the only like scenes that you get with her. She's not a that neither Mickey or Debbie Salt are major players throughout the movie like Billy and Stu were. And I think that's a symptom of the fact that this movie went through several rewrites during production because they were trying to get ahead of script leaks because this was in the early days of the internet. And so there were people like, oh, people were trying to leak the script and stuff because they wanted to know who the killers were and what was going on with the new Scream movie. And so I think you can really tell that the script had went through a few revisions, and not necessarily in a good way. As much as I think script rewrites are your friends, there are some times where, like, if you panic and rewrite a script to get ahead of internet leaks, this is what's going to happen. You're going to end up with a killer reveal that doesn't have the impact that it really could have and should have because the seeds just weren't there throughout the movie. Mm. But much like Mickey, much like Mickey. Nancy Loomis, Laurie Metcalf does a fantastic job, I think, post reveal. She plays it with just the right amount of crazy. But you can tell, much like Mickey, that she's also lost her mind, but her motivation is a bit more understandable because it's a simple motive. It's revenge. She wants revenge on Sydney for killing Billy in the first film, even though Sydney killed Billy because she was defending herself, but that's beside the point. Nancy Loomis is crazy and she's going to kill her. And then and Cotton shows up, and um, he's seeming. The movie wants to make you think that Cotton is just going to let Sydney die because um, because Nancy Loomis is like, you, if you let me kill Sydney, you'll be the star. You'll have everything you've ever wanted. Blah blah blah. And then Sydney love reluctantly agrees to that Diane Sawyer interview, which was the point of that scene earlier that I mentioned, where Cotton was acting suspicious as hell. And then so Cotton shoots Debbie Loomis, Mrs. Loomis, um, and so and that's the end of that part of the movie. Um, so another complaint I have with this movie is that the pacing isn't quite as good as it was in the first movie. Particularly with the handful of phone calls we get. And the one that sticks out to mind is there's a scene earlier with Cece, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, where she's sitting at she's house sitting at a sorority house, and she's watching Nosferatu on the TV, which I think is funny that Buffy the Vampire Slayer is watching a vampire movie. And she gets a phone call from Ghostface, and it escalates pretty quickly. It doesn't have like the slow sort of build up that a lot of the phone calls in the first um, movie had. So I think that's a little disappointing. There's not even really that many phone calls in the movie to begin with. Like there's one with Cece, and there's the one with Randy, and then that's pretty much it. um, and so that could have, I think, there could have been a handful of more phone calls throughout the movie that would have added some variety, would have helped build some of that tension. But speaking of tension, I probably should have mentioned this during the standout sequences section of this video. But another standout sequence is the excuse me, is the scene where Sydney and Hallie are trying to get out of that cop car, while Ghostface is passed out. That is such a great scene. Such a great scene, even though part of me, as Sydney is crawling over, passed out Ghostface, part of me is just like, just rip off the mask, just rip off the mask. But still, regardless of that, it's still a phenomenal sequence that will have any viewer on the edge of their seat, because like at any point it's like you can't see Ghostface's eyes throughout the mask. Through the mask you can only see the mask, and it's like at any point he could just he could just come to life and stab Sydney or stab Hallie, basically at any point. So that's cool. Then the scene, but that precedes that, the chase scene, not really a chase scene, but the scene where Ghostface hijacks the car and kills the two detectives who had been basically Sydney's bodyguards throughout the whole thing, is so cool. One of them gets such a gnarly death where the pole goes right uh, through his head, and you can see the body twitching, and it's really gruesome. Um, but so yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Stream 2. I really don't have anything else to say. Oh yeah, one more thing that probably should have mentioned this when I talked about Derek. I will say I do, Derek does die in the third act, but Derek is kind of one of those characters that did kind of sort of grew on me when I first watched this movie. Kind of didn't really like him at the beginning of the movie, but I kind of like him by the time. I was kind of sad by the time he gets killed. But I will say, what I think brings this movie down in my Scream ranking is that motherfucking cafeteria scene. The scene where uh, Derek, who, by the way, this was apparently the audition for Derek. This scene was the audition for Derek, so I feel bad for whoever had to audition for that scene. The audition for Derek, you with that scene, my heart goes out to you. Although Jerry O'Connell, I think, does his best, but it's like, man, like tonally, like I understand that Scream does have some of that teenage melodrama elements to it, but it's like this is just too much. Like this is like it's so cringe. It's so like even just watching it, like I just can't get shake the feeling of secondhand embarrassment throughout the scene. I even think I saw this bit of this panel that Nev Campbell did back in I think 2015 or so, where she basically mentioned that she didn't seem to like that scene or either, and it's like that scene. It's tonally just feels kind of out of place in a slasher movie. Like it just kind of feels out of place in a murder mystery slasher movie, you know. But it's like at the same time, it's just so cringe. It's unneeded. I know that the scene is important because Derek does give Sydney his omega his Greek letters. That necklace that Derek was wearing, and so he gives it to Sydney. But it's like I feel like you could have just had that done in a regular dialogue scene. You didn't need this thing where you're fucking where Derek sings a song from Top Gun to Sid, and the whole fucking cafeteria is in it, and it feels like a scene from High School Musical, even though High School Musical wasn't a thing in 1997. But yeah, I hate that. I hate that scene so much. I fucking hate it. It's stupid. It's unneeded. It's unneeded, and that honestly basically single-handedly brings Scream 2 down in my ranking. Spoilers, it's as of right now, it is below both Scream 4 and Scream 5. But I really don't like that fucking scene, man. I don't like it. I always skip it whenever I ever watch Scream 2. Anyways, so that's pretty much all I have to say regarding Scream 2. What did you guys think of Scream 2? Please leave your opinions in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe to Movie Mortis, where movie madness lives. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.